happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
And you may have read the U.S. Supreme Court decision on the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. Was it a big loss or a big win? We will discuss this decision at length with James Esseks, director of the ACLU LGBT and AIDS Project.
And of course, this was an ACLU case, so we are going to the source and hope to do a much better job than the mainstream media in analyzing this decision. And we'll spend more than 20 seconds on it, as they all did.
Yes.
Meanwhile, 3 big LGBT court wins are now being appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
San Francisco looks as if it's going to get its first out gay mayor.
Our president has once again refused to recognize LGBT Pride Month, although we can give you a list of other things he's celebrating this month. And the National Park Service did recognize us.
Bermuda's High Court has reopened same-sex marriage to gay couples.
The European Court says member nations must recognize same-sex marriages, at least in the immigration process.
Germany's president has apologized for its historic persecution of LGBT people.
But we hope they persecute the U.S. ambassador, out gay Rick Grinnell, who needs to be kicked out of the country immediately.
Don't hold back.
AIDS, am I going to get sanctioned like the Colorado Civil Rights Commission? AIDS activist Mark Milano scores a big win for people with HIV and AIDS seeking certain kinds of medical treatment.
And in entertainment news, the category is Pose on FX, and we'll also review Hello, Dolly on Broadway. I know it's been open for a while, but I finally saw it. All right.
We are extremely pleased to have with us our old friend James Esseks, head of the LGBT and HIV/AIDS project at the ACLU, who we are privileged to call on in important moments like this for analysis of Supreme Court decisions and other things. And of course, this time it's the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision, which we've actually heard, I would say it's a thin layer of icing. We've heard it everywhere. But we've heard virtually nothing. So we wanted to get the real story because it is confusing. On the one, everybody says, oh, it's a narrow decision. But the fact is that it's almost not a win for the right wing in many ways. Andy and I have been arguing about this, and we'll go into it. But it's a huge public relations win for the right wing because this has been reported all over as a win for the baker, a win for religious actions. And so we need to hear from you. But first of all, this must have been a hell of a week for you.
Well, it was certainly, Monday was a difficult day for us at the ACLU, but also obviously for the clients, that Dave Mullins and Charlie Craig, the 2 guys who are at the center of this.
We have a picture of them
who, they come out of this as the only people who are not protected in the state of Colorado for this one incident. And that they bear the brunt of what the court thinks of as anti-religion hostility by the Civil Rights Commission. Dave and Charlie had nothing to do with that, and it's really unfortunate, and I think a travesty that they bear the burden.
So what do you think of the news coverage? Has this accurately represented?
Well, look, I think the problem is that, headlines are short, and the reality is that this was a loss for us. The baker wins, and Charlie and Dave lose.
The baker is Jack Phillips, and we have a picture of him as well.
Yeah. And but the bigger picture, thing is that I think that there is an awful lot in this decision that is actually very good for LGBT people going forward. And I think the core point is our opponents, Alliance Defending Freedom and anti-LGBT advocates like them, have been pushing a campaign for a long time to use religious exemptions as a way to undermine LGBT equality. And this was their effort to get a ruling that said that the Constitution requires discrimination, that the Constitution gives them a license to discriminate based on their religious beliefs or based on their artistic freedom. And that is precisely what they did not get in this opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you say the Baker won, but he didn't win. He did not win the right to discriminate on the basis of religion.
Absolutely.
All he won was a technical decision that the Human Rights Commissioner had spoken disparagingly of his religious beliefs, and therefore he doesn't have to sell the cake. But that's not an overall right to
exactly.
do
They,
that.
and then that just sort of highlights how they didn't get what they wanted. They wanted a ruling that said that the Constitution gives them a license to discriminate and they can turn people away based on their religious views. They didn't get that. Instead, they get a technical win that says, well, the government agency, the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, that was hearing the claim of discrimination against the bakery, at some point evidenced anti-religion bias. Now let's put aside for a second what those comments were and whether they are anti-religion bias or not.
Nonsense is what.
Yeah, well, and look, and we can come back, absolutely come back to that, and I agree with you. But the court says the Civil Rights Commission misbehaved. The Civil Rights Commission acted in a way that wasn't neutral, that wasn't impartial, and that was hostile to religion. If you accept the idea that they did those things, that is a bad thing. That shouldn't happen, and that would be unconstitutional. I don't think that happened. But what the bakery and the Alliance Defending Freedom get out of this is a ruling that says, well, when and if a government agency that's an adjudicator of legal claims, like the Civil Rights Commission or a court, acts in a way that is anti-religion, that violates the Constitution. But that's all they got, and it's not what they were looking for. So they get a new tool that they didn't have in a serious way before. They don't get the major, blunderbuss that they were looking for to undermine and depending on the scope of it, destroy civil rights laws for LGBT people and for everybody else. The fact that they didn't get the thing that they wanted is a victory. And it's not just that they didn't get the thing they wanted. It's that the language, the opinion is full of language from 6 justices on this court. That is very affirming of stuff that we all agree on, but now is in a Supreme Court decision. What are those things? It says that the state has the power to pass civil rights laws that bar discrimination against people in Colorado, including LGBT people. It talks about the harm of discrimination as a real thing. That shouldn't be a big deal, but in this context, it is. And most importantly, they say, look, it's true that clergy, ministers, have a constitutional right based on free exercise of religion to make distinctions among people's marriages. They can say, we're going to marry you and we're not going to marry you. That's part of their faith. They get to do that. The government can't tell them they have to do something different. That of course, is no one was ever arguing anything different. But the decision says that, of course, we can't go that right that clergy has, that can't be extended to businesses and to be extended broadly, because we would end up in a situation where many, many businesses might be turning, for example, same-sex couples away, and that would cause incredible stigma. And it also says, look, that would lead to a situation where businesses would be free to put signs up in their windows that say, for example, wedding cakes for heterosexuals only. And it's clear that Justice Kennedy doesn't think that's okay. And it's not just Justice Kennedy, but 6 justices sign on to that language.
But again, the baker's argument and what he was trying to say was, if I have to participate in this same-sex wedding by making the cake and maybe bringing it and all that other kind of stuff, I can't do that because this is something that my religion disapproves of.
Yeah.
The woman in the Orleans Flowers case, which is going to be decided or not decided by the court, it's up before the court now, same thing.
Yeah, but Andy, exactly, that's the argument they made, and they didn't win that. Now, so what they get, they don't get a decision that says they're right. And we get language in the decision that suggests that 6 justices on the court may well think that they're wrong.
So go back to the sense that everything seems to turn on how the Colorado Commission on Civil Rights acted and whether they were hostile or not. Did you pick up on that as you were handling the case and that, oh my, this might be a problem?
Well, look, it is something that has been part of the case, but a very small part of the case earlier on. The bakery was complaining about this, but again, it wasn't a major part of their argument because it's not the way they wanted to win. They wanted to win on this broader ground. They wanted to win based on the arguments you were just laying out, that it would violate my free speech rights to have to sell something that I don't.
Actually, they started the case talking about religion, and then as they went into the Supreme Court, they really emphasized first free speech. This is compelled speech. If I have to create something for you, you're compelling my speech. Now, some of the most conservative justices said, yes, you're right. But that's not what the majority said.
Yeah, and it was only Justice Thomas that said that. And look, again, they didn't get that ruling. It's not compelled speech because the state is not telling them that they have to say anything or do anything. They're simply saying, look, you have to, if you're going to sell X product, you're going to sell this cup of water to straight people, you have to sell it to gay people. If you're going to sell it to black people, you got to sell it to white people. To Muslims, you got to sell it to Jews.
But
that's all.
The court also said, and they repeatedly brought up, as you say, Jack Phillips' friend who went in and said, I want some anti-gay cakes, or I want some cakes with some anti-gay Bible verses on them. And the Colorado Commission on Civil Rights said you can't compel somebody to write an offensive message. No. But they said, oh, right?
No, yes, but. And the reason I say yes, but, look, what Dave and Charlie brought to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was a claim that they were discriminated against because they're gay, meaning they said, we want a wedding cake, and that's as far as the conversation as they got. They didn't say anything about the kind of wedding cake. He said, oh, I won't sell it to you because you're gay. This guy, William Jack, who is a...
No, he didn't say that. He said, I won't sell it to you because you're going to use it for a same-sex wedding. No. I will sell you anything else in the store, but I will not participate in your wedding.
That is actually a contested fact. Whether he actually offered all this other stuff, it certainly is. It is their view. It was not a finding by the courts. But regardless, whether he said, I'll sell you cupcakes and cookies for something other than a wedding, but I won't sell you anything, including a wedding cake for a wedding, he's still saying, I won't sell you a cake, this wedding cake that I would sell to anybody else because you're gay. That is turning people away because of who they are. William Jack, which is this other friend, I believe, of Jack Phillips, the baker at the bakery, he goes into a series of bakeries in and around Denver and says, I want you to do a cake that has anti-gay Bible verses and statements or images on it. And 3 bakeries say no, I won't do that. And he sues, and the Colorado Civil Rights Commission says no, that's not discrimination. But that's right, it's not discrimination. Why? Because they didn't turn him away, saying we won't here's a product that we would sell to anybody, and we won't sell it to you because you're a Christian. Instead, they said this is not a product that we would sell to anybody. Whereas the product that Dave and Charlie were looking for from the Masterpiece Cake Shop Bakery was a wedding cake that they sell routinely, day in and day out.
So let's get to the fine point here. He says, I create these cakes with you, and you are telling me what kind of a design you want, what you will accept, and what you wouldn't accept. It's not on the shelf. I mean, I think they should have been able to do that. But he's saying this is part of my creativity. And what I worry about is other people coming along saying, I'm providing a creative service, and I don't want to do it for your evil ceremony.
Yeah, well, so look. So the free, look, we litigated this question of the free speech argument. The Colorado courts, the Washington State Supreme Court in the Orleans case, the New Mexico Supreme Court in the Lane Photography case, and New York courts have all said that does not work.
Right.
Okay, but here's the thing. You're worried about the consequences. You're worried about that argument. I'm worried about that argument too, but neither one of us should be worried about that argument because of the decision that came down on Monday. Because the decision that came down on Monday gives that argument no fuel whatsoever. And in fact, it doesn't just not advance it, it snuffs it out, or close to snuffs it out, because of the language I've talked about. Because of the language that says clergy have that right, businesses do not have that right. Businesses do not have the right to put signs in their window that say no Muslims, no gay people, etc.
Although across the country they're trying to pass laws that give individuals and groups that accept government money the right to discriminate.
Absolutely, and there is an active campaign by Alliance Defending Freedom and many other anti-LGBT advocates to create as many licenses to discriminate through statute in the states and in Congress as possible. This case was about, does the Constitution require that they have the right to turn people away? And they wanted that. If they had gotten that ruling, it would have overridden every civil rights law in the country, at the federal level and in all the blue states as well as in the red states. That's why this case was so important. That's what was at stake here, and they didn't get it. Which is why people like why we're saying this is a win in the sense that we have dodged a bullet that would be a terrible thing.
So a couple of things on that. First of all, I assume that the difference is that while it may be an individually custom-made cake, it doesn't explicitly say anything about same-sex marriage. We know that publishers have a right not to publish books that they find offensive, or there's the T-shirt case of people not having to say explicit things.
Yeah. So look, like businesses have control over their product, including publishers. They can say, I'm going to publish this book, but not that book. Yes. Or the bakery can say, I do 3-tier cakes. I don't do 2-tier cakes. You want a 2-tier cake? Go someplace else. So they have complete control over what it is that they want to make. They don't have complete control over who it is they sell it to. The states have the power to say you cannot discriminate based on the identity of the customer. Right. The reason, look, I know that this issue has bedeviled people, but yes, there are products that businesses produce and sell that are creative, that are expressive. And I'm happy to say that, to admit that cakes can be in that category. But the legal question that the court should be engaging with, and this is the doctrine that they have applied in many other contexts, even though they didn't really apply it here, is something that says, look, the question isn't how expressive is this product. The question is, when the state legislature passed the civil rights law in Colorado, were they aiming at speech, or were they aiming at religion, or were they aiming at conduct? If they were aiming at speech or religion, that's a big problem. Government is not supposed to be aiming at stifling people's speech and expression or restricting people's religious beliefs. But if they're aiming at conduct, that is the conduct of selling goods and services in the commercial marketplace by businesses open to the public, that is perfectly constitutional, even if some of the businesses that are regulated in terms of who they can sell to and who they can't sell to, who they can't turn away, are engaged in activities that are expressive. The court has said again and again, incidental. If the state, the legislature, the law is not aimed at speech or aimed at religion, even if it has incidental effects on expressive activity, it is constitutional.
Yes, I even think they said something about, hey, Mr. Phillips, nobody's going to know this is your cake, nobody's going to be thinking about that when they look at the cake. It's a wedding cake.
So I agree with you that the language in the decision is extremely positive and purports to support non-discrimination laws that cover sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever. But at the same time, they do support religious rights, religious feelings and expression. And you go to something like the Hobby Lobby case, which this court decided and said that the owners of a business, even though privately family owned, have a right because of their religious feelings to not cover contraceptive insurance for their employees. And what I worry about while trying to convince people that this case is a positive case in many ways for us is that it is not an actual decision on that, and down the road, how can we not expect this same conflict to come up, and how can we not expect the court to decide otherwise?
No, look, you're right. The decision is good in the sense that, again, they didn't get what they wanted, and that would have been devastating to our civil rights. It doesn't mean, on that piece, it doesn't mean that their campaign to win those rights in the courts is over. There's more litigation that they're bringing and that we're fighting, and we meaning the community. And so this issue is not going to go away. It's going to continue. Although, again, I think that their argument is harder after Monday's decision in terms of the rights.
But I have to interrupt you and say, again, the public relations war, everyone in this country watching the news media thinks they had a big win. The baker has a right to refuse these customers, and that the right wing will exponentially increase their attacks on us.
That is the fact that the decision has been spun the way it has been is a challenge for us. But look, the decision is also bad.
That's the polite way of saying.
It is a challenge.
It's tough.
It is tough. But look, the decision is also bad, right? For the reasons that you guys have both talked about. The idea that as I said earlier, I think they have established what appears to be a very low threshold for showing that government has been hostile to religion. Because I don't think that the remarks made by the commissioners here actually, show that or evidence that. And so they have a new tool coming out of this decision, and they are going to go looking for any context in which they think that government entities have been hostile to religion. And as I think you said earlier, that in their view, I think that means any time the government tries to enforce a civil rights law that would conflict with the religious views of
like a Catholic adoption agency, which gets
Exactly.
federal state funding.
Yeah, and if the state tries to enforce the non-discrimination provision against that religiously affiliated adoption agency, they're going to say, "Oh, Masterpiece, you can't do that."
Right.
Look, it is absolutely a scary thing. It is absolutely something that they're going to try to exploit. I think that it's going to be. I don't think they're going to get very far with that. We're going to have to litigate this stuff in a lot of different places.
So what does it mean?
But I'm not as worried as you are.
What does it mean in the decision
Concerned.
when the court emphasizes, quote, "The law must be applied in a way that is neutral toward religion"? I mean, how can you be neutral about religious groups that teach terrible things or whatever, or arguing for violent action or whatever? How do you be neutral about all this?
Well, look, I think the way you're neutral about this is simply to say, look, if the government should not be taking sides in religious debates, and the government should not be penalizing people of faith or faith organizations because of their views. And the court certainly thought that there were some comments by people in the Civil Rights Commission in Colorado and one comment by the Intermediate Appeals Court in Colorado that the court viewed as inappropriate and as judging the views of the bakery. But how can they be neutral? I think that's actually very easy. They're like if they're going to apply a civil rights law to a business that has religious views, as long as, again, they're not bringing the claim because in order to get at the religious views, because they're motivated to enforce the law because of the religious views, that might be a problem. But also, the law was passed. It's a rule that applies whether to everybody, every business, regardless of whether they have religious views that are in favor of discrimination or religious views that are opposed to discrimination. So that is a law that is neutral as to religion and should not create problems.
But this baker and the florist, whose case is being looked at by the court right now, they both say, we take all gay customers and we sell them stuff. But not when they ask us to do something in support of an activity. So are we just protected based on our status? But if someone doesn't like suppose I go to a restaurant and I say, I'm making a reservation for 4. We're going to celebrate our anniversary of our same-sex wedding. Can they start saying
no? So no, because that is the claim that they asked for and didn't get. The protection that they sort of did. But this was their best shot. They're not going to stop. Absolutely, they're going to keep trying. But I have a lot of hope based on the language and the decision that they're not going to get that at the end. But I've also want to.
While Kennedy is there.
While Kennedy is there.
See, that's the thing. I mean, Alito and Gorsuch and Thomas are obviously poised to make bad decisions on these things. Yes? No?
Yes.
I am concerned.
You're concerned. Okay.
I am concerned.
You can say yes to
Well,
that.
and we don't know about Roberts. He's always a bit of
Yeah,
a
well,
mystery.
look,
He's a tease. Roberts is a tease.
He upheld the Affordable Care Act once.
But for the wrong reasons, right?
Well, he found a reason.
But look, one of the things that I think is notable about this decision is the majority opinion that Chief Justice Roberts signs. There's a concurrence that I think is very problematic by Justice Gorsuch and also signed by Justice Alito. The Chief Justice Roberts does not sign on to the Gorsuch-Alito concurrence. I think that is not a that is an important thing. That has some meaning.
Kagan and Stephen Breyer signed on to the majority opinion. This was a 7-2 decision. I mean, some people might want to say, well, that makes it a good decision. But
I don't know that I don't know that it makes it good or bad. I think that what's going on here is Kagan and Breyer. Look, we will never see, or history will tell when the various justices' papers are released in 50 years or whenever it is that happens. Maybe we'll learn more about what the horse trading was. What did they get? But look, it's a common thing in courts, whether it's 3-judge courts at the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court or other state courts. You got multiple justices, and they go back and forth. I'll sign if you change this. I'll sign you if you add that. That is, if people are wondering, well, how in the world could Kagan and Breyer sign on to this thing? That is what was going on there, and that's a normal thing, and that's part of how we get protected.
Well, I can say this, you probably can't at the ACLU, but folks, I mean, this is why the Senate elections are so important this year, because if we can get 51 Democrats, or 51, we can stop the most egregious appointments that Trump is trying to make, and that's our only bulwark against a really bad court. Speech over.
Lower courts and the Supreme Court. So, is marriage threatened ultimately?
Not yet, not now. And look, I think that I don't see a threat to marriage in this opinion. And look, I think there's some polling that came out just recently showing, I think we're, nationwide, we're at 67, 68% approval and support for the freedom to marry, and that every state except for Alabama has majority support for the freedom to marry for same-sex couples. And so, that's obviously a transformation. In 96, it was exactly the opposite. It was like, 68 the other way. And so I think that means that it's true that way on the right, people are still want to fight about marriage. The marriage fight is over in the country.
Would they have standing, though, to say, well, I want to bring a case, and these laws are still on the books, and I want them reinstated for some reason? Would anybody have standing to do that? When they get a better court from their point of view.
Look, the only way
I'm not trying to give them ideas.
Yeah, no. Look, this is no great insight. If a government, if a clerk, no. So what I'm going to say is no great insight. I'm sorry. No. So we're not giving them ideas that they can already have. If a county clerk says I'm not issuing licenses and gets sued, and they're going to lose in the trial court and they're going to lose in the next court. But if the court takes that's like okay.
I'm left still, and I think you've answered this more than once today, and probably infinite number of times here. But I'm left feeling that the public still may not understand how you resolve a conflict between a constitutional guarantee of religious freedom and civil non-discrimination laws, and whether, in fact, we have any leverage in that kind of conflict. And do we need a constitutional amendment to bolster our rights?
Yeah, so at this point, I don't think we need a constitutional amendment because, look, here's the frustrating thing about this case. This should never have been a hard case because the courts addressed this question multiple times in the past. That is, in the context of sex discrimination laws. There's a whole series of cases. These cases didn't make it to the Supreme Court, others did, where religiously affiliated schools said, you know what, they were sued because they were paying men more than women for doing exactly the same job. And when they were sued and the woman said, hey, that's sex discrimination, you can't do that, the schools said, Yes, we can, because it's part of our religious belief that men are heads of household, and we'll let the women work, but even though we think they should be at home, but we're certainly not going to pay them the same. And the court said, no, you can't do that. And they had no problem saying, you have the freedom of religion. You can believe whatever you want to believe, and you could act in accordance with your beliefs up until the point where you start harming other people. And they said it in the race context as well.
Right. So if this should have been an easy case, which I think is a very important thing you just said, why did Kennedy do it this way and not just say this is nonsense and throw it out,
absolutely.
as Ginsburg told him to do?
Look, I think the problem is, we are collectively, all of us, in the process of building an equality norm around LGBT people in this country. And we've made great strides. And the sort of public opinion stuff that I just talked about in terms of marriage is evidence of that. But it is not as strong as other civil rights, other equality norms that we have in the country. And I'm not saying there's no problem on race, there's no problem on sex. Boy, is there in the country. But we're still building the commitment to equality for LGBT people. And the way that manifests itself is in a Supreme Court that has been protective in many ways of our rights, but still is worried about this context and therefore goes for this kind of one-off weird off-ramp to decide this case just on these facts. Really, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card for this bakery that will, I think, by rights should never be repeated. They don't get it again.
But meanwhile, we'll add rocket fuel to the right wing in their thrust to come after us.
They absolutely ended fuel. I would say it's, a little bit of fuel in a little toy car, not rocket fuel. They're going to do something with it. I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
And we're most concerned about where the court's going to go in the future, and there are other cases we're concerned about. Most prominently, the cases that say discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is sex discrimination. Transgender is sex discrimination. Yes. There was another one, the Gavin Grimm case was sent to the as appeal to the Supreme Court. The Second Circuit case about a lesbian who was discriminated against has been appealed to the Supreme Court. That's going to be the big enchilada, is it not?
Yeah. So I think those cases. I think it may well be. I think there's a decent chance that the court is going to take one or more of the cases that raise this sex discrimination question. Do the bans on sex discrimination in federal civil rights law, do they cover lesbian, gay, and bisexual people? There are 2 petitions pending right now. They won't be decided until the fall on that question. And then there's a petition coming in August with the same question about do the bans on sex discrimination cover transgender people?
Do you want the court? I mean, of course, it's going to be decided by the makeup of the court, but do you want the court to decide this?
Well, it's a difficult question because look, we are making very significant progress in the courts, in the lower courts, but below the Supreme Court on this question. There are now 5 or 6 federal appeals courts, different circuits, regional, geographically defined regional courts in the federal system that agree that trans people are covered in lots of different contexts, in education and in employment, et cetera. Yeah. And now there are two federal appeals courts, federal circuits, that agree that lesbian, gay, and bisexual people are. One track is to just build that out so that when the Supreme Court ultimately gets the question, most of the courts are already on board. The other question, so the difficult question is, do you pull the trigger and ask for the Supreme Court to decide that right now? The 2 of those 3 petitions are by employers that don't like the fact that federal appeals courts have said that LGBT people are covered, and we don't have any control over that they have asked for it. One of the petitions is by an employee in Atlanta who was told, "Oh, you can't bring that claim," by the courts, and is saying to the Supreme Court, "Hey, that's not fair."
I think we're back to the Senate races this fall are going to make a huge, huge difference.
The court is enormously important at our agenda going forward, since we have real challenges in the states that don't have civil rights protections for our community, and we currently have challenges in the Congress because because Republican leadership will not bring the bills that protect us to a vote, even if we have support, and we do have. I think the Equality Act has close to 200 sponsors in the House, and you need 217 to pass it. So, but they won't bring it to a vote. So given all of that, the courts are incredibly important to our agenda, and that means the Supreme Court is pivotal.
They are, but in the wake of this decision, two things happened. One, we didn't take to the streets over this decision. I mean, I'm not happy with it, but I mean, but we didn't take to the streets. But also, the other thing that happened is a wave of people across the country are saying, we are open. Our business is open to all.
Yes.
Open to all, I think, is the hashtag.
Open to all. It's open to all.com or open to all.org. I forget, but yes, it's a wonderful campaign.
Open to all is the hashtag.
Yeah, open to all is the hashtag. People should go look at it. It is a truly amazing coalition of organizations. It's not just LGBT people. It's every civil rights movement that there is, all getting together saying these principles are enormously important.
I mean, when they went down to Mississippi, when they passed this law that said you could discriminate, the Times went around and talked to all the businesses, and they said, we want everybody's money. They couldn't find anybody who said they wanted to turn anybody away. And so the culture has changed in that way. But will the law keep up with it?
Yeah.
Well, also fundamentally important to us is the ACLU, and we thank you for the work you do, and we thank you for coming here repeatedly to talk to our audience and explain things in much greater depth and with much greater sophistication than they get elsewhere.
Go to aclu.org and read all about it. This is the LGBT and HIV/AIDS HIV project.
Great.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Hope to see you again soon, but not for bad news. So we will hear, or should hear very soon, whether or not the Supreme Court will take the Arlene's Flowers case from Washington State, where state courts have decided, and federal courts there, that the lesbian couple should not have been rejected by the flower shop. And there's another important case that is less well known from South Dakota. There's a death row inmate who says that the jury gave him the death penalty because he's gay, and they didn't want him to enjoy being in prison all the rest of his life.
With men.
Shocking.
That's what they said.
So he's saying this is sexual orientation discrimination, and that is up for Supreme Court review, and we'll let you know whether they end up taking that.
Let's see if they really like us. All right, the elections were held this week.
Yeah, they were.
Big primaries in San Francisco. It looks like Mark Leno will be the first out gay mayor of San Francisco, beating out London Breed, who was there now as the mayor, or succeeding the late mayor.
He got the most votes in the primary.
They have a weighted system where you rank.
The top two vote getters.
Where you rank? No. Where you rank them? Yeah. So
preference voting.
Yes, preference voting.
Well, Gavin Newsom looks like he will be the next governor of California, and I have to say, I think he has really built his whole career on his bold decision to perform same-sex marriages in San Francisco before they were legal.
Even criticized by Barney Frank for that.
Exactly, and yet his willingness to be brave and move forward is what made him a winner, and I think we should all take that as a model.
And a former mayor who used to oppose some of our rights, Dianne Feinstein, who is now a supporter of ours, of course, prevailed in her Senate primary.
And young Zach Walls, 26...
Well, before we leave California, and we're very encouraged by the results in the House races, because it looks like we're going to be able to take back the House with the way it turned out.
And a few in New Jersey, too.
Yes.
In Iowa, Zach Walls, 26 years old, you may remember that name. 7 years ago, he was speaking to the Iowa State Legislature in support of his lesbian mothers for non-discrimination laws, I think. And he was so eloquent, and the video of it just went worldwide, and he was a big hero. And he also started the Scouts for Equality movement, where he, as a Boy Scout or Eagle Scout, was working for LGBT inclusion and civil rights. Well, now he's 26 years old. He was 19 then, and he is running for the state legislature in Iowa, and he has won his primary and is expected to win the general general election.
And a lot of women want one on the Republican side. You can read all about that. And in New York State, our old friend, Assemblymember Danielle O'Donnell, is finally starting an LGBT caucus in the legislature.
Okay. Can we go to the president for a couple of things?
Yes.
I'm horrified by his pardon, of course, of Dinesh D'Souza, who is an overt homophobe and nasty human being. But Trump wants him out there spewing his bile and hatred and is rooting him on, and so gave him a pardon.
Yep.
I'm also horrified by the death in ICE custody of trans woman Roxana Hernandez, 33 years old. She's from Honduras. She came to this country seeking asylum from all her mistreatment and the attacks against her in Honduras. So she ends up with the Immigration and Customs, whatever they are. And she died of in New Mexico of complications of HIV and a heart attack and pneumonia.
And what they're doing to kids now is totally illegal. It's not the separation is awful, but not illegal. But then now the way they're holding them beyond the limits is illegal.
In cages.
I've seen the
and
cages.
Out of sight.
I have seen the cages. It's the whole thing. A lot of shame, folks. We have to stop this.
On a less dangerous but just as horrifying level, the Trump administration has yet again, for the second year in a row, refused to recognize LGBTQ Pride Month.
But you can celebrate National Caribbean Heritage Month or Great Outdoors Month and a bunch of others.
National Home Ownership Month.
Just not us.
Yeah, so let's go into...
but on the other hand, at the Stonewall National Monument, which is controlled by the National Park Service, part of the administration, if you want to put it that way, 100 flags were put up. And they were nervous about putting one up when we raised it with Michael Petrelis a couple of months ago. Anyway,
longer than that.
These were donated by Stephen Love Hernandez, and you can...
Some of them have already been...
appropriated.
But they're supposed to stay there, so please let them.
And we talk about the elections. We have... Well, actually...
Wait, I wanted to do other Pride stuff before we get to that.
Right.
All right, so next, 3 ad executive gay activists in New York decided to do a little guerrilla subway campaign. Now, in New York City, there are signs that look like this that tell you about changes in subway schedules. So they put this up and said, service information, holiday, June 1st through June 30th, Pride Month. No bigotry, hatred, and prejudice at this station. How does this affect my trip? It doesn't. Travel alternatives. Take the, what does that say?
Express train.
Take the express straight to hell.
Yes.
There's another one, a version that says sashay away. Thank you. Well done.
Isn't it great that we can still laugh with all that we're going through?
Now, there are also a couple of pro and con pride events in soccer. First of all, there's this woman, I'm skipping ahead a little, but I think this is related. Jacquelyn Hinkle is a well-known U.S. women's soccer team player.
She's a devout Christian.
And a devout Christian. But she refused to play with the current U.S. women's soccer team because they wanted her and the rest of the team to wear these pride jerseys. And she said on the 700 Club, God doesn't want me to wear this. So she...
Didn't God put a rainbow in the sky? I mean, isn't it his invention?
And meanwhile, thank you to the U.S. women's soccer team for wearing those jerseys.
Something else?
And then the Irish men's soccer team is entertaining the U.S. men's soccer team in a friendly competition. And in honor of Pride Month, they wore these jerseys. So thank you to the Irish. Thank you to the U.S. men for not refusing to play.
One of the baseball teams had a Pride Night, and they were wearing rainbows as well.
Meanwhile,
what's going on with New York City Pride?
Oh, thank you for asking. I was just about to go to that. So this week I went to a town hall meeting held by Heritage of Pride, which runs the parade. Yeah. accompanied by their NYPD friends, the cops, because they're
Gay Officers Action League.
but brass from the NYPD in addition. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
Oh, it was quite an array. And representatives from the mayor's office. So a couple hundred members of the community turned out to say, we're not wearing stupid wristbands to decide who gets to march.
I can't wear
We
them.
hate all the corporations in the parade. Oh, they're going to be paper. They're not going to do anything to you. And we don't like the restrictions. We don't like the barricades. And we don't like cops marching in uniform. There ensued, lots of talk from the audience with all the people in charge sitting there stone-faced, refusing to say anything. And then after they had allowed the community to have their say, they replied to questions, refusing to have any interaction with the audience. And it became immediately apparent they were holding this meeting just because they had to for form. And they are not making a single change. They're not listening to anything that's been said to them. And here's the really horrifying thing. Next year for Stonewall 25, they're not talking about a big march into Central Park and a rally. They're talking about this stupid little changed route they have with nothing.
I understand that there was a woman there named Ann Northrop who said maybe we should just start at the starting point and march uptown, up Fifth Avenue, maybe past Trump Tower, and have a real spirited radical march.
I'm for that.
I'm for that
even
too.
if I didn't say it, I applaud that. Well, the regular march is supposed to start on Sunday, June 24th at noon at 16th Street and 7th Avenue. Now, the resistance contingent is supposed to start at 3 p.m. in the middle of the march, right after the television coverage ends.
Of course.
Give other people a chance. We have a national emergency going on. Do you think you could pay attention to that?
The spirit of Stonewall needs to be kept alive.
So perhaps we should all gather at 16th Street and 7th Avenue at noon, and instead of going downtown with their march route, we go uptown to Central Park.
I'm with you. I hope maybe we can solidify this by next week.
Meanwhile, Salt Lake City Pride had 100,000 people. Thank you.
And DC Pride is having Judy and Dennis Shepard as their grand marshals.
Okay.
And good to see that. Can we talk about some other state things?
Sure.
Kansas City, Kansas passed an LGBTQ non-discrimination protection. That's good. The polling in Massachusetts on the transgender rights referendum, 52-38. We're winning. That's not bad. It's nice to be over 50.
And California has banned publicly funded travel to Oklahoma because of the anti-LGBT adoption law they passed.
And the New York City Board of Health voted unanimously to consider a proposal to make birth certificates gender neutral. You can choose the X option if you're non-binary.
I have to say, note to the control room, I did not make the proper notes. I don't know what time we're supposed to end this show.
Okay.
Maybe you could tell us. All right. In other news, let's see, we've done that.
Well, I had a wonderful
the Parkland kids.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
Thank you.
The Parkland kids are now on a nationwide tour this summer to register young voters in 20 states and in all counties of Florida. They're going across the country. This is how things are going to change in this country. More people becoming engaged, more people registering, more people voting, and these young people could turn the election in 2018, which we better do.
Sad news from Florida in Jacksonville, where another trans woman, Antasha English, who'd been out as trans for 20 years, was a well-known and well-loved performer, shot dead. And in Texas, in Dallas, young trans man, Jay Alfie, has won the fight to be announced by his non-birth name, his non-official name, at Allen High School graduation. He transitioned as a freshman at the high school.
And they had a big LGBT prom in Chicago for 150 students from 30 schools under a grant from the Chicago Public Schools, which is good. And one of the kids said, I felt like I was wrapped in one big hug.
All right, international news.
Yes. Oh, and I just want to, there is going to be a memorial service for Connie Kurtz in New York, June 14th, 6 o'clock, Congregation Beth Simchat Torah, 130 West 30th Street. I'll be there.
And so will I, and that note will be in our weekly show note. Go to gayusatv.org to sign up for that. Big news from Bermuda.
Yeah, we buried the headline.
Well, we thought the news from Bermuda was going to be that they they put into effect the Domestic Partnership Act.
They did.
They did for about 2 days. But then the Constitutional Court said, the Supreme Court said, nope. We're getting rid of the marriage equality ban. We are letting marriage equality take place. So thank you, Bermuda.
Guyana.
And thank you, Guyana. They held very brave their first Pride Parade.
And they were protesting government inaction on LGBT rights. They weren't just having a Pride Parade.
And there were no attacks. It proceeded peacefully in Queenstown, the capital of Guyana.
In Belfast, they had what they call a March for Equality, and they are demanding that the UK government, led by Theresa May, give them same-sex marriage because they don't have a functioning parliament in Northern Ireland right now, and the UK parliament refuses to act because they're dependent on the right wing from Northern Ireland.
So as you can see, tens of thousands of people showed up for that march, which is great. In Ecuador, the Constitutional Court has ordered the registration of the daughter of two mothers, legitimizing the relationship of those two moms.
The European Union Court has said that you've got to recognize same-sex marriages. I think it was a Romanian case or something like that, but you've got to recognize them for at least for immigration purposes.
If you have a native-born married to an outsider, in this case a Romanian married to an American, you must recognize the American as the legal spouse.
Because 13 out of 28 nations in the European Union have same-sex marriage, but so there's a lot that don't. In Germany, the president there apologized to the LGBT community for the historic persecution of LGBT people, especially the Nazis. But it's nice to get an apology. There should be some reparations. And what else in Germany?
Well, the U.S. ambassador to Germany is the Rick Grinnell. He's a sort of hateful guy who, in spite of being an out gay man, has said misogynistic things and nasty things. Now, he said recently in an interview, I think, that he has heard concerns throughout Europe. Concerns throughout Europe have contacted me to say there is a resurgence going on. I absolutely want to empower other conservatives throughout Europe, and other leaders. He is blatantly supporting the conservative right-wing takeover of European governments.
This is wholly inappropriate for a diplomat.
Exactly.
I would even have to stop my stuff if I became a diplomat.
So
which I
know that a large portion of this country likes President Trump because he upsets norms.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's really inappropriate, and Germany has objected to this guy's statements, as have, I think, a lot of other European leaders, and he may not last as ambassador.
They could expel him.
Germany.
The last time a gay ambassador was expelled, it was by the Pope from the Vatican State.
The Supreme Court of Chile has said that trans people can change their names and sex on government registries without having surgery or taking hormones. Self-determination.
Sao Paulo had hundreds of thousands in its Pride. It is rated the best Pride in the world, actually.
In Israel, the grandson of the chief Sephardic rabbi is marrying his boyfriend. They don't allow civil marriages in Israel. They all have to be religious marriages. So maybe this is just more of a commitment ceremony. But
I went to a Sephardic funeral for a guy with AIDS. They wouldn't even acknowledge the partner years ago.
Well, that happens pretty across the board. And in the UK, Orthodox Jewish schools are rebelling at being mandated to teach an LGBT inclusive curriculum, including marriage. One of their rabbis said, there is no future for us in England.
And the Anglican Church in Brazil says we're going to have marriage for you.
All right. In AIDS and HIV news, Nike has made sneakers with pink triangles for Pride. and ACT UP said, really, well, give us some of the money. And then others said, ACT UP, why are you trying to profit off the pink triangle? That's ridiculous.
Well, an old ACT UPper named Mark Milano, one of our close friends, he's a big HIV/AIDS activist, longtime survivor of HIV. He won a big lawsuit against a doctor in New York, Dr. Emmanuel Osare, a cosmetic surgeon who refused to correct his gynecomastia, which is enlarged male breasts. And he said, I can't do it because you have HIV. And the court said, this is a violation of the ADA, it's a violation of city law, and it set a big precedent for how doctors can treat people with AIDS.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Congratulations and thank you,
And I'm hearing
Mark.
from more and more people who say their Truvada is going through the roof, and we have got to turn this around.
All right. A couple of minutes of entertainment news.
Tony Awards are on Sunday. It's Sunday on CBS.
Oh, okay, set your DVRs. Well, let's start with what we didn't like, which was Dance Nation, which is a little play off Broadway in New York. I thought it was going to be terrific. It got great review in the New York Times.
An ecstatic review in the New York Times.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be about, all these women are supposed to be playing 13-year-old girls, and none of them, they're all adults. And some of them,
one guy.
Some of them are as old as 60. But you know, it just...
Not much dance and sophomoric, I would have to say.
I thought some of the humor.
Yeah. You saw Hello, Dolly.
Finally, after 130 years, I have finally gone to see Hello, Dolly. I was taken by a friend with Bernadette Peters. That's Victor Garber, the out-gay Victor Garber, and the wonderful Bernadette Peters. It's a very crowd-pleasing show.
I recognize them because we sat behind them at The Boys and the Man.
And, you know, they have a little bit too good of a time. They don't do the show completely straight, so to speak. You know, they have some fun with it. I think that comes from Bette Midler taking the role, and she's coming back this summer. But I can certainly recommend it.
And Pose. What'd you think of Pose?
Well, I don't...
On the FX network.
This is from Ryan Murphy. It's about ball life and competition set in 1987 amidst the AIDS crisis, and a record number of transgender actors.
Producers, writers. Janet Mock is a producer, writer on the show.
Entertainment Weekly
Lady J.
Entertainment Weekly calls it a reboot of Fame. It's got so many characters who do not have a voice on television that I'm not going to knock it. I mean, it's, you know.
Well, it's based to some extent on Jenny Livingston's movie Paris is Burning. Which
She's a consultant to the thing.
She is a consultant on Pose, which I like because I like Jenny, although her movie on the ballroom scene was also controversial. I thought, you know, there was enough there for me to think that it can improve and start involving me. I thought it was a little light to begin with, but I'm sticking with it, and I expect it to draw me in.
And Donald Trump is an off-camera character. Somebody who works for him is one of the main characters.
Well, yes, and so they showed Trump Tower, and they talked about him a little. I thought that was a little gratuitous, but...
I thought the Supreme Court was a little gratuitous.
Yeah, so did James Esseks. But we're glad he came in. And look, we can do the news in 20 minutes. Well, we used to do that anyway.
We did. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.